In last week's episode, we talked about David O'Reilly's game Everything and the interconnectedness of it as one item in the larger set of all things, which we sometimes refer to by the nickname Everything. Let's see what you had to say. Astrogoose, Cynthia Lee, and a couple other people pointed out the relationship that this thought has to Eastern philosophy, which is, a huge and varied tradition that we only really talked about insofar as acknowledging that it is Alan Watts' background and his interest in what he's best known for. And I think, one thing that's worth pointing out is that the 5 philosophers that David O'Reilly lists in the credits of Everything, which is what we used as our kind of rubric for the episode, does not present a total and complete portrait of philosophers struggling with how it is that everything is or is not interconnected. That is a small subset of one tradition, and that there are many other traditions, including Eastern philosophy, that deal with these questions. But as Astrogoose points out, there are a lot of synchronicities and even direct influences between those many traditions. I would just check out their comment. It's a great one. This is stuff that, I don't know a whole ton about. I kind of only know about as much as you see me talk about on Crash Course Mythology. But, I do know that Schopenhauer was greatly influenced by the Upanishads, I think is how you say it. I think I'm pronouncing it correctly. But yeah, just to acknowledge that, yes, this is a huge part of this conversation and another source for this kind of thought. Diana Watson points out the kind of radical empathy that you see a lot of children have for objects, wanting their stuffed animals to have a good time, the sadness for a balloon and other related things. And Vladislav Gerasimov asks whether or not that is radical empathy or a kind of anthropomorphizing of those things, giving them human emotions or human desires when it's not really necessary, or is not the case, rather. And I think this is sort of at the heart of, I think, the question that we're trying to get at, which is it possible for a human being to step out of the human experience and to appreciate the kind of being of a thing, and either its experience, which is going to be completely unlike any form of experience we're familiar with, its desire, again, completely unlike any form of desire that we're familiar with, or its existence, its novelty rather, without referencing back to the way that we view the world and the way that we exist in the world, and what happens when you try. Vladislav's question was, radical empathy in my mind, see things without necessarily giving them human emotions and human qualities, which is why it's pretty much impossible for us. So that's the self-help problem that we get stuck in with a lot of this tradition, is that it always loops back around to being a good person who is able to have insight and who is able to act effectively as a human and not necessarily appreciate what Donna Haraway might call your kin, right? Like the objects that are around you that you sort of have a relationship with. And the worthwhileness of that struggle, I think, is something that seems to be a pertinent conversation in philosophy right now. So yeah, whether possible or not sure, but seems like it's something that a lot of people are talking about. Web Pixies, we will solve that problem right now. Kayla Jeanson characterizes the radical empathy that was suggested in the episode as exhausting. And to be fair, this is essentially one of the things that Ian Bogost gets at in his book, that to try to find within ourselves the meaning inherent in or a connection to the multitude of things that are around us, my iPad, my coffee cup, my weird little fidget spinner, how do all of these things feel? Man, that's hard. That's tough. And is probably going to be unpleasant. And that is why I think that one of the things that he suggests is being open to something's novelty as opposed to being concerned about its interior existence. And I think one of the things that might be worth considering is not a radical empathy for literally all things, but an attempt to appreciate the what might be the hard to understand experience of the things that have an importance in our lives. And that is the kind of batting with the weight on, empathetic batting with the weight on that I think we're trying to get at, is that if there is a thing that is impactful, what does it mean to attempt to empathize with or appreciate it in a way that you have been sort of forgiven previously for not doing. Again, results of that, who knows, but maybe a worthy exercise? I'm gonna put all these things away now. Equations of Motion talks about how certain portions of this line of thought can be applied to the study of physics, and how there is a lot of unlearning that happens, that you have these ideas about processes or objects out there in the universe, and you kind of have to abandon what you think is true about them in order to, or abandon what you assume about them in order to fully appreciate how it is that they work, and what they want, and what their processes really entail. And I think this is really interesting, especially given, the conversation that we've already kind of had about anthropomorphizing things, and whether or not that this kind of unlearning and then anthropomorphizing that Equations of Motion talks about, like how it's helpful and in what degrees it may help us understand things from a human perspective versus as the things themselves. But maybe in the end it doesn't really matter, as long as what we are getting is this kind of appreciation that Equations of Motion talks about. That, if the end result is still this interconnectedness, and it is still this, wanting to work with, wanting to understand, that, how we get there maybe isn't that important. Please consider that if your weighted companion cube is an expression of the fundamental essence of being found in all things, that if you destroy it, you may also be destroying a part of yourself.